into a Friday edition of In Touch with Indiana Sports, powered by HoosierIllustrated.com. John Alden with you as always. Hope you've had a great week, and I hope you're looking forward to what will hopefully be a really good weekend for you and yours. Real quick, this episode is unfortunately going to be significantly shorter than I originally had planned. This is actually the second time I'm recording this. I didn't record the entire first version of the show, but during the first recording, I was maybe about 8 minutes into it. My wife started getting really sick, pregnant wife issues with different things, won't get too graphic with that type of stuff. But because of the amount of stoppages I was having to do, I decided, I'm going to scrap the first version and we're just going to do a shorter show today. So apologies for that. I do have a guest segment that I'm going to share that'll help the show, of course, reach at least a little bit closer to its normal length. But Tyler Smith from ISL, he covers the Pacers normally, but he put something on social media the other day that really piqued my interest, and I recorded that segment with him last night, and I'm going to share that with you today. He put together a tier list, his own tier list of basically his preferences for who he would like to see potentially be Indiana's next head men's basketball coach. So I will share that with you here shortly, but I do want to go ahead and give you just some thoughts on where IU currently is. Of course, they finally got the monkey off their back, at least one of the monkeys off their back, and that this particular monkey was getting a good win after a big win. Of course, the big win being what they did against Purdue this past weekend, but lately this season, they've been following up wins like that with disappointing losses, and that was not the case when they defeated Penn State 83-78. Really, it felt like they were just kind of exchanging punches throughout that game. And Indiana, even without Malik Reneau, that's something else I want to mention. Even without Malik Reneau, found a way to win. Didn't quite cover, but that's okay. At this point in the season, when you're fighting to get into the NCAA tournament and you're trying to keep momentum on your side, getting a win, especially for this Indiana team, is more than enough to really kind of keep things afloat, because any sort of loss, especially if you lose to Washington tomorrow, which I wouldn't expect Indiana to do, that would really kind of, I hate to say it would ruin your tournament chances, but to a team like Washington, who really isn't, they've had some moments, but they're currently on a 3 or 4 game losing streak. Their most recent win was against the same Penn State team that Indiana just defeated. They only beat them by 2 points. I guess not that really matters, the margin, but haven't won since then, and losing to a team like Washington wouldn't really help, especially with where currently Indiana is right now. And they're going to that would put you in a situation to where you would have to probably get to the Big Ten Tournament Championship to even have a shot. Not only that, but you'd need to win against Oregon and Ohio State as well. So hopefully Indiana can get the job done tomorrow night. We will have a post-game wrap-up show. I don't know if it will be Kyler Staley with me or one of our other friends at HoosierIllustrated.com, but I will be with you tomorrow after Indiana's game against the Huskies. 6 o'clock on Peacock. We'll have you covered afterward with immediate reaction or near immediate reaction to what happens between Indiana and Washington. So hopefully it's good stuff. Hopefully they continue the momentum. Malik Reneau, as I mentioned earlier, he fell ill right before the Penn State matchup, had to go to the emergency room, unfortunately. And I tried figuring out if and I don't know if I happened to have missed this amidst all of the things going on right now, but I do not believe that he made the trip out west with Indiana. So not only will he potentially be out for the game against Washington tomorrow night, but I would assume that would also mean he would miss the game against Oregon. So that could potentially be a problematic situation for Indiana. But we saw them respond well the other night against the Nittany Lions. And we've seen them play well without Malik Reneau in other situations. Last night or against Penn State, 10 for 15. That's something that Indiana was doing well in previous situations where they were without one of their big men. And of course, that being Malik Reneau earlier this season when he was out for an extended period of time. So I don't think this Indiana team absolutely needs Malik Reneau to, I mean, you of course want him long term so you can get the full potential out of your team, but we've seen them adjust to losing him previously. So, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and transition over to our other segment with Tyler Smith. I'm going to do sort of a deep-ish dive into his tier list. We're going to talk about a number of different candidates. Many of them we have mentioned on the show before, and just kind of get a different perspective on where things stand and a different person's opinion on what may happen when it comes to how Indiana may handle this new hire here over the next several weeks. So, without further ado, from Pacers coverage, from ISL, it is Mr. Tyler Smith joining us right here on In Touch with Indiana Sports. Joining me now for the first time on In Touch with Indiana Sports, it is Mr. Tyler Smith from ISL. Welcome. Thank you for making your debut here today, sir.
Thanks for having me. How's it going?
It's going well. We're gonna chat. You put something up on social media the other day that piqued my interest, and the primary reason for me bringing you on is this tier list of potential Indiana men's basketball coaches that may or may not end up being the guy who will get hired at IU. I know you're normally a Pacers guy, but I want to talk primarily about this because there's a lot of, I feel like most people that are on this list are guys that a lot of people have thrown out, maybe not necessarily in any specific order, but there's just a lot of different stuff there. And I guess we'll go from kind of top to bottom, and you label these, for those who haven't seen it, there's dream hire but unrealistic at the top. There's favorite targets, good but not exciting, undecided, interesting, and then pass. So starting with the dream hires, you have Nate Oates, Brad Stevens, and then Dusty May. I do think it is fair to say that at this point, especially now with the Dusty May extension, that it is unrealistic that any of those three guys will be a part of the conversation here in the next few weeks.
Yeah, you would think so. I mean, the fans that will never let the dream die of Brad Stevens or even Dusty May now, some of the things that were said from those guys or from their camp, I've seen a lot of fans just be like, I wouldn't close the door completely because, the thing that Brad Stevens told Goodman, I think, was just like kind of incomplete and like, well, the door's still open. It's probably
that is true because people did just say that was a denial when it really wasn't anything. It was just nonsense is what it was.
Yeah, just a weird kind of a statement that didn't, dive too far into it. But obviously still unrealistic, even though the dream will still be there, every time IU's looking for a new coach because he's still young and all that stuff that goes with it. But yeah, probably unlikely. Nate Oates, unlikely with not only the crazy buyout, but also I don't think Indiana would be considered a step up for where he's currently at and what he's got going on. So those are the three ones. I also say as we get going, this list, kind of as you mentioned, was from a lot of Indiana websites, like the main names that I've heard. So there's some names that I left off that maybe they just haven't been really linked to the coaching search, which who knows, they could end up being guys that are linked at some point. But I just kind of went with all these guys that I've seen from these different sites and made my own tier list and went from there.
One thing I'm curious about is you have Dusty May as a dream hire. I think there is a group of people that would agree with you that Dusty May would be a dream hire, of course, with the Indiana ties. What to you makes him fit that category? Because for me, I don't mean to say that he's underwhelming, but I think he's benefited a lot from one particular season that he had at Florida Atlantic, of course, where he got the Final Four. Everything before that was pretty ho-hum. He's had moderate levels of success since then. Of course, he had the decent year right after his Final Four run, and he's doing pretty well at Michigan right now. What about this really screams dream hire if Dusty May did end up making that jump to Indiana?
For me, I think it's the whole package with him. Obviously, the Final Four run, I think he backed it up the following year, had a top 10 ranking for a bit. This year in the running for a Big Ten championship in year one after Michigan was terrible last year. I just feel like, he's incredibly impressive how he speaks, the Indiana ties, being young. Would love for a guy to come in and be here for 2 decades. I mean, I don't know how realistic that is, but it would be amazing to not have to do this every 4 or 5 years and have somebody that's locked in and for a long time. But big thing for me, too, that I will say is if I'm taking like the top priority of again, my personal opinion, Indiana needs to get a guy that knows offense. All right, they've had, R2 is more known for defense. They've had, Crean was great at fast break offense, but not always half court. I mean, it's been a long time since like the half court offense has been a thing of beauty inside the hall. And I think these fans want shooting, and they want effort, and they want movement. They want, whether a guy's a top recruit or not, to be able to play hard, to be able to shoot and score. And yeah, you want that tough-minded. You want teams that play hard, but man, offense can cover up for a lot. And I just want to see a modern offense, and I think Dusty May does that as well.
Well, let's look at your list, or I guess your tier that's labeled as favorite targets. Now you got TJ Otzelberger, Scott Drew, and Shaka Smart. And I'm assuming from left to right is your 1, 2, and 3, the way that you've got them in there. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah.
So what about Otzelberger then stands out to you the most?
I just love, kind of similar where I think it's the total package. I do think that whoever they get, unless it was like Brad Stevens or somebody, there's going to be like, there's no certainty with this. Like none of the guys on this list is, absolutely for sure they're going to be amazing for 20 years or whatever. But I think he is, as far as an up and comer, one of the safest bets as far as what he could do. He's already got a few Sweet 16s under his belt. He's a top 10 ranking this year. He's proven he can recruit with good but not elite resources. Young coach that could be here a long time. I would love for Indiana fans to be able to say that their coach could beat up everyone else's coach because he's ripped. I mean, that's pretty cool. But yeah, and I was looking at some of the KenPom stuff. He's been pretty consistent for the last several years in offense and defense. So I don't know if there's, maybe an Iowa State fan would tell me differently, but as far as like KenPom, it kind of looks like, pretty solid across the board. And it's one of those things where, he's been quoted to say he's got a dream job right now. His wife has ties to the school. He may not want to leave, but fans have to remember money talks. And if you go in there and say, hey, we're going to double your pay and triple your NIL resources, and that's
almost more valuable than the pay at this point.
Yeah, you could get more recruits. You could, and I have all these fans all the time saying it's not a good job anymore because they've been bad. To me, that makes it even more intriguing because, there's a lot of pressure. But if you can win in Indiana and bring it back, then you're going to be a legend, and that's going to be maybe more enticing than some of those programs that kind of stay good and you're just the next coach in line. Like if you could bring Indiana back from the dead, then man, you're going to be, it's going to be pretty cool. So I just like a lot of what he has to offer.
With Scott Drew, one of your other 3 favorite targets, I think he's also a popular pick for anyone that when their school, like for example, with Louisville and Kentucky, his name came up a lot last year, and of course he didn't take either one of those jobs. Do you think there is a job that would pull Scott Drew away from Baylor at this point? Because I don't know if it's just because I'm close to the Louisville and Kentucky programs where I'm from, but I felt like if he didn't jump for specifically the Kentucky job, that was enough for me to say, okay, he's a Baylor guy for life. Maybe I'm totally wrong, but do you think the Indiana job has anything that would pull Scott Drew away from Baylor?
Yeah, that I don't know. There's been some people that have kind of speculated that he views Indiana as like a job that may entice him. As you said, he could just be a lifer, similar to TJ at Iowa State. I mean, it could just be that's where he's going to be. Sometimes things change a year or two later as well. Maybe kind of a not great year. Maybe there's some things behind the scenes or NIL stuff that, timing of everything. Maybe it's kind of a situation where the timing would be better at this point. So I can't say that I have any, inside knowledge on how he would view the Indiana job. But I do feel like maybe he's a guy that at some point could value from change of scenery. He's been there forever. And to me, like his worst seasons or mediocre seasons is what Indiana would consider their best season in the last 9 years, which is win 25 games, easily make the tournament, and win a tournament game. Like the last 3 years, they've lost in the second round the last 3 years. That's considered Indiana's best season in the last 9, and that's kind of the average for Scott Drew. And I feel like if he went somewhere and just kind of revitalize. Still pretty young, and I don't know. I think it'd be a really fun fit, even though some would say he's not done as much since the national title. But yeah, those are some pretty big words that he has won a national title.
And then Shaka Smart, he kind of ran off of the steam or adrenaline, however you want to refer to it as, of the VCU Final Four for a long time. Didn't do a lot at Texas, and then kind of was good enough at Marquette, and then finally had a pretty good tournament run. I believe it was last season. And is there anything, I guess, again, I don't want to make it seem like I'm fishing for inside information because I know you don't have it, but do you think Shaka Smart, think he has maybe that inkling to jump back into, not that he's not at a Power 5 job already with the Big East and Marquette, but do you think he'd want something more potentially?
It'd be cool if we had another Marquette to Indiana connection and another guy
That's
saying
true.
It's Indiana and come there. But this one too, I know a lot of fans would be split, which I think in some of the replies of my tweet kind of split on that. But I'm a little bit partial towards two names on this list, partially because as a coach myself in high school, there's a handful of coaches that they have a lot of resources. They have like a lot of kind of coaching mentorship type stuff. And Shaka is one of those. It's incredibly impressive what he does for other coaches, student athletes, the stuff he puts out there. We've got some drills named after him and stuff like that. So I'm probably a little partial towards him, but I do think he's very impressive. He does a very good job. I think it would make he's a very sharp dude. I think the university would be proud. And I think the floor would always be, you're going to get a really good team. Hasn't had many of the big runs, as you said, since VCU, but constantly a ranked team and always in the mix and winning 20+ games. So you could do a lot worse.
Going into your next year, and we don't have to go over every single coach. I know it seems like I've done that so far. I definitely wanted to do that with the top, the cream of the crop, so to speak. But you got 4 coaches in your next tier: Mick Cronin, McDermott, and for some reason, I can't put a name to face of the other 2 in your good but not exciting tier. Who are the other 2 in that list?
Buzz Williams and then Brad Brownwell.
Brownwell. Yeah, Buzz Williams looks so much different nowadays than he did back when he was with but when he was in Marquette. I forgot he was a Marquette head coach.
Yep.
Brad Brownell, of course, of Clemson. Who do you like the most out of those 4 guys? For me, I'm not a big Mick Cronin guy. I think it's more of the off the court, the way that he kind of handles himself with the media. And I don't know that would really mesh well at IU. So he's kind of the bottom of that group of 4 for me. But who's kind of your favorite of those 4?
That list of 4, I don't think I really put in a particular order. I feel very similarly to each of them, where it's, like I said, that title, good but not as exciting. I think fans would be split if any one of those were hired. I don't think it'd be considered this home run, but I do think all 4 would do a good job with a chance of being great. And I love McDermott's offense. He's older, so that's kind of tough. But as the football program with Cignetti,
I think the older coach, unless you're hiring somebody that's Rick Pitino's age, I think you're pretty safe. I think that's kind of become a thing that's not as big of a deal nowadays.
Yeah, I think he's got several good years left, and love his offense for sure. Another consistent kind of a team there at Creighton. But I think, Buzz is another one of those guys that, like Shaka, has a lot of resources. So I'm maybe partial to him. But another guy that hard nosed, you know what you're going to get. You're going to get solid both ends of the floor. Seems like a great guy for the student athletes and all that. Similar to you as far as Cronin, I'm even split on how he handles media, because I've been, quite honestly, so bored with the IU coaches the last 8 years in the media that part of me is like, bring it on, bring on the crazy quotes and the, every media.
Especially seeing how that, of course, worked out with the football season this past fall.
Like, who knows what he's going to say next? And he said something earlier this year that kind of made me cringe about his players. But then, this last one was amazing. He talked about, I care what these guys are when they're 27, 28, not 18. So I'm going to be hard on them and make sure they're turning into better men. That was amazing stuff. And he's another one that, if he doesn't like that travel in UCLA that he's been vocal about, Midwest guy, he's again, the floor, I feel like, would be something I've written about on different sites, is that I think IU fans are not even pining for the glory days. They just want a good, solid team every year that has a chance. And I think all four of these guys, but probably especially Cronin, would have that floor to where you're going to get at least a good team that has a chance for more.
And he's openly complained about having to travel so much from being out on the West Coast. And, of course, all four of those Pac-12 teams don't have very favorable travel schedules. So that could be, even if it's not for the Indiana job, he may be looking for something else in the future if that's not something he wants to deal with year in and year out. So very interesting. In my opinion, the most intriguing tier is the next one, the undecided tier. And it's actually contains the two coaches I've talked about the most, Chris Beard and Ben McCollum. I think it's pretty safe to say why you would put both of these in undecided, most particularly Chris Beard, because all of the baggage that comes with him. That's always part of the conversation when Chris Beard gets brought into this discussion. But of course, you also had Rick Pitino, who openly endorsed Chris Beard to be the next Indiana head coach. I do think that comes a lot from a place where, Rick Pitino has a past of his own, where he kind of feels like he was outed, maybe not unfairly, but not necessarily with the best circumstances at Louisville, maybe even prematurely, he would say. But do you think Chris Beard at all? I've talked with a few people about this now. Do you think there's any real shot that he could be the IU head coach? And if he was, what would you think about it at this point in time?
From what I've personally heard, I don't think there's a shot. But, since we're still just in late February and there's still a lot of time, it's kind of hard to really know the info you're being fed. I mean, there's some people that it's just like the boards, but other than that, there are some sources that I've, have had over the years, and some of them have been undecided on him, and then some say absolutely not. So there is a little speculation that more so than just the, that one case that got dropped, was it money related or whatever, but there's been sources that think there's more to it in more cases. And if that is the case, and there's absolutely zero chance that Indiana would look, maybe they've already done their homework on that. Maybe it's something they would do a deep dive on. Cause I think Chris Beard, the coach, is a phenomenal fit. I mean, checks every
It's unfortunate that he has the baggage, because I've said this too. I've said if he doesn't have the domestic violence allegations that I know have been dropped, but if he doesn't have that a part of his life, his past, whatever you want to call it, his resume, then he is absolutely the quintessential Indiana basketball coach. Of course, he's never won a national championship, but he's been to a national championship game with Texas Tech. And of course, he was a part of was he a part of Bob Knight or Pat Knight's staff at one point? I was talking with somebody about, it was Bob Knight's staff, I believe, at Texas Tech. So it's literally everything you would dream of, minus all of the extra stuff that comes along with it. So I think that's really the saving. And he's even talked about, he even shouted out Bob Knight a couple of weeks ago during one of it wasn't a post-game press conference, I believe, but whenever he was talking with somebody after one of his wins with Ole Miss. It's a very intriguing candidate. Who knows if he will ever become something that, who knows if his name will ever truly gain momentum with this job, is what I'm trying to say here. But the other coach you have in the undecided category, Ben McCollum. And of course, I know I'm not the only person who said this, but he's kind of the Curt Cignetti of college basketball right now. He's had so much success at lower levels, particularly at Division II. I believe won 4 national championships at, I think it was Southwest Missouri State or one of those Missouri State schools, whatever it might be, wherever he was at previously. And now he's at Drake. First season, he's won 25 games already, and he's now already – his name has come up for any big-time job that may open up or has already opened up, for example, Virginia and maybe even Iowa later on if they end up moving on from Fran McCaffrey. I'm assuming it's just, will it translate to the Power 5 level with you with Ben McCollum?
Yeah, it's part of that, and a little bit taking a kind of a deep dive with him. I feel like his teams have shot the three well, but they have played pretty slow from what I've seen. And I could be looking at not all the right things as far as Sam.
So it could be Mike Woodson with better 3-point efficiency.
Maybe. Yeah, it just seemed like play style. And I saw several fans comment whenever his name was kind of in these coaching profiles. That was early on. I saw some people saying play style wouldn't translate, too slow. So I started looking into it a little bit, and that's when, like, the first couple times I saw even his interviews on YouTube, I was like, this is an impressive dude who's on the ascent. Somebody's going to snatch him up. I think he's going to be really good. Then I saw some of that and looked at it, and he has had some good three-point shooting teams, but it's been a little bit more, is it just because of the level? I don't know if it's like necessarily modern, getting guys open, flying around the gym kind of stuff. So it would feel a little Archie-like to me, even though I was excited at that time. And it doesn't mean like the next guy who's Archie-like will fail, because absolutely there could be a guy out there that has a similar resume that just takes off. It just didn't work for Archie, but the next guy with a similar resume may pop off and explode. So that's why I kind of kept him in that interesting level.
Yeah. I guess I should have said Archie with better three-point shooting, not Mike Woodson with better three-point shooting efficiency. But your final two tiers are interesting and pass, with 2 in the interesting tier, and then you got 4 in the pass. And I love how you include Steve Alford. I do think this has been at least from my point of view, I've not seen anybody throw Steve Alford's name around this time when it comes to the Indiana job. I guess people have finally moved on from that, especially having already done the Indiana alum experiment with Mike Woodson. You've also got Porter Moser in the pass category, and then two faces I'm on once. So the 4 guys I've not named, I can't put name to faces. Who are these final 4 that I cannot put names with?
I believe Will Wade is in there.
Okay,
and a guy from, and now I'm blanking as well.
That's my fault. I should have been more prepared with some of these dudes' names, but. Either way, none of the 4. I feel like if I had known who they were or been more familiar with who they were, I am familiar with Will Wade. I've just never seen what his face looks like.
Yeah, he's the one on the left.
But his name has come up a lot with I believe the Miami opening, now that Jim Larrañaga will no longer be with that program.
Yeah, I think he's a good coach. It's not a situation where I would just completely freak out and think it's not going to work. I mean, it's just more of, what was it? 2 years ago, 3 years ago, or something recent, getting let go for certain recruiting thing, like having another one of those, like, oh, he's better now, or the rules are different now, it's okay. It's just kind of, don't want to go down that road.
Last thing I want to ask you before I let you go, you don't have Bruce Pearl on here. Is it because you think it's completely unlikely in any scenario, or is there another reason?
I do think it's unlikely, and even though there was some smoke around him last year, but I don't know how truthful that was. I just think, again, he's doing so well there that unless he's got this burning thing inside, burning passion, where he's like, I want to go to a former, blue blood and bring him back, and maybe that's my legacy here at the end. I just don't see it happening. I'll pull up my tiers again. If I am in one, let's see, the second, I had my tweet pulled up. Now it's not there anymore, so I can't even see my own list. But I'd put him up there for, one of the top couple tiers.
Yeah.
If I was putting him in
I'd say at the moment he would fit in that dream but unrealistic, because anytime I've mentioned Bruce Pearl, he seems to be the guy, if he were to come to Indiana, I feel like he checks all the boxes. I feel like there wouldn't be a lot of arguing within the fan base. I feel like most people, maybe even everybody, would be on board with somebody, especially when you look at what he's already doing right now, what his pass is like at Tennessee. And I think he could be at the peak moment of his career right now with what he's doing with Auburn. But Tyler Smith, I appreciate you for coming on here and chatting about all these coaches. And we'll see if any of these guys end up panning out to be the one. I tend to think that, and it's solely because of what happened with Curt Cignetti, I think Scott Dolson is going to humor Ben McCollum more than people might think, especially if he were to get no's from some of the bigger names at the power programs. I'd be willing to, again, I don't have any inside information on this, but I just think Scott Dolson would be a little more risky in that regard, just based on the success he had with Cignetti last year.
Yeah, that's the $1 million question. Is he looking to go big game hunting because it's the basketball program, or is he looking for kind of a similar approach, under the radar guy who, I mean, Dolson's legacy could just be unreal if this works out as well. So very interesting to see. And I think right now the program's in a good spot. It's kind of flipped here in the last month because they're going to get a new coach, and that was, I think badly needed. But now fans that wanted a different coach can relax and root for their team, and this team can actually possibly make the tournament, possibly even be dangerous in the tournament, with a lot of guys that are in their last year playing and a lot of Indiana guys. So it's in a good spot now. Hopefully they make a run and then nail this hire, because they're gonna need to nail it. It's been a while, so we'll see what happens.
Anything you'd like to promote before I let you go?
Just on Twitter, Tyler_Smith_ISL, and IndySportsLegends.com is the main place that I write for Pacers and Hoosiers, and especially with conference tournaments and playoffs coming up. A lot of love this time of year. Baseball coming for those who like it as well, and it's almost March, so let's do it.
I'll have to reach out to you once again to talk some Pacers here as we get into playoff time, because a lot of people, I think you put this on social media the other day, a lot of people wrote off the Pacers, and now they're having really kind of their best moments of the season over the last several weeks. So we'll do that hopefully sometime in the future. But again, Tyler, I've took you way too long, but I appreciate you coming on.
Thanks a lot. Thanks.
Big thanks to Tyler Smith for his time and his insight and his opinions. He's somebody who's not been on this show before, so very much greatly appreciate him coming on, and you let me kind of pick his brain a little bit and letting me embarrass myself too, since I didn't recognize some of those faces or names, whatever you want to call it, for some of those head coaches. But I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this show. I apologize for having to cut this so short today. Even in between this cut, I was tending to my wife, trying to make sure that she was getting whatever she needed to begin feeling better. So if you're the praying type, be praying for her. I'm sure she'll be okay. I'm sure it's nothing. I'm not trying to make it a bigger deal than it is. But she normally doesn't feel like this. And of course, it's even more so enhanced with the pregnancy. So I'm going to cut this one off. Enjoy your weekend. Should be back tomorrow evening for the Indiana basketball postgame wrap-up show, whether it be with Kyler, Drew, or Dylan. One of them will be with me to react to everything that happens between Indiana and Washington. And feel free to subscribe if you like what's going on with the channel. I know today's show is not normally what you get with this In Touch with Indiana Sports, but hopefully things will be back to a normal style on Monday, and look forward to doing that with you then. So until then, this has been another edition of In Touch with Indiana Sports, powered by HoosierIllustrated.com.